All right, it's 2 o'clock, so we will just go on and get started. So thank you everyone for coming. My name is Carter Snay. I'm sitting here with James Kahn, and we will be presenting this webinar to everybody. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions during this presentation, just feel free to throw them in the Q&A section, and we will get to them at the end. All right, so I'm assuming everybody can see my screen. So this is the NVMe and NVMe over Fabrics Plugfest 18 webinar. This is an event that is going to be happening in the 2nd and 3rd week of November. So just a quick little introduction and agenda of what we're going to be going over. So here are our pretty faces. I am Carter. I'm sitting here with James. So I have been working at the IOL for about 6 years now, working in NVMe for about 5. And lately I've been handling a lot of our testing and customer relations. So chances are if you've had any questions about testing, it's gone through me. Now I'll introduce James.
Hi, I'm James. I've been working at the lab for 5 or 6 years now also, about 4 years in NVMe, and I'm working mostly on the software development side, but also a technical manager working with Carter.
All right. So perhaps most of you might know who we are at the IOL, but in case there are some new people, I want to just go over what we do just as a lab and what we do for NVM Express. So what we are with the NVMe Express organization is we are the main testing lab for all devices to make sure that they are conformant to the NVMe standard. So this is a project that's been going on since the early 2010s, and we maintain the integrators list for the NVMe Express organization. And just about the lab in general, we are associated with UNH. We work under UNH, and as a result, a majority of our staff and workforce is student-driven and staff-managed. We are the third-party testing facility for NVM Express, as well as tons of other technologies in industries such as data center, baseband, and several others. And we've been testing NVMe PCIe since 2013 and started testing over Fabrics in 2018. So now we can offer both of those. All right, so this is kind of a big one right here. This is the first Plugfest that we're planning on doing in person since 2019, I believe. Definitely didn't do it in 2020, that's for sure. So both NVMe Plugfest, NVMe PCIe Plugfest 18 and over Fabrics will be in-person events during those 2 weeks that I mentioned before, November 7th and November 14th. So that way we can see everybody and have those good face-to-face one-on-one conversations that we've been missing for so long. All right, going over what the integrators list is now. So at this point, or at least as of September 30th, we've got nearly 400 products on the NVMe PCIe integrators list and nearly 100 products on the over Fabrics list. So the listing has been going up exponentially since the last 5 years or so. So we're having very good participation on these conformance programs, and we hope to continue to do so in the future. Now, what goes on the integrators list? For the PCIe list, it can be drives, host platforms, or PCIe switches. And the over Fabrics is a bit more varied just due to the fact that there are different transports, different types of devices such as initiators, targets, or switches. We will verify them all over any of the relevant NVMe transports that are being used today. We also will list whether it's the IO command set for NVM or ZNS. So as of a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we started listing ZNS command sets on our integrators list as well. So how does a device get on the integrators list? It's dependent on whether it's over Fabrics device or a PCIe SSD device or host platform. But for our most common kind of device, which is just a PCIe SSD, it will need to pass both PC edition and LaCroix edition of the 18.0 Interact test tool, which is based off the 18.0 test plan that was released about a month and a half ago. It needs to pass conformance and interoperability tests, which is just testing on 5 NVMe host platforms, making sure it can boot multiple operating systems on 2 different systems, as well as hot plug testing for the applicable form factors. And also, if MI is supported and requested, we'll be testing NVMe-MI using Teledyne-LaCroix analyzers. And for a host platform or host or PCIe switch, we are just testing with various NVMe SSDs. We have plenty here at the lab to try with different vendors and different features to support. For over fabrics testing, it's slightly different just because there are different types of devices. For a over fabrics target, it's mainly the same, except there is both the base testing and the over fabrics specific conformance tests, as well as for interoperability, we are testing with 2 different switches and 2 different initiators. And if you are a switch or an initiator trying to get certified, we are only doing interoperability testing as there is no conformance test plan for those specific devices, but we'll still be doing the same sort of builds and multi-switch, multi-target interoperability fabrics to make sure that it can interoperate with different types of devices. So here is the information that is required for the PCIe or NVMe over fabrics integrators lists. If you look at our lists on the website, this is just a kind of a one-to-one lineup on what we will be listing. It is also what is used on the reports. So if you were to send these finished and passing reports to any of your customers, all this information will be available to them so they can see and make sure they know they're getting the same device, the same firmware version, same form factor, any of that information they might need. We also list out on our integrators list product link pages. So, this is kind of just a base information for anyone to look at, but then they can click on the link and get more information based on what you want to share on your own websites. All right, I'll be handing it off to James now.
All right, so I'm going to cover some of the things that have happened with test plan 18 updates. So for one of the things, with every major release, which we have 2 of a year, we try and update some of the tests from FYI to mandatory. So any time that we check that the previous runs of the tests have been pretty successful, we see a lot of drives passing them, and it looks pretty good, we basically bring it before the ICC and make sure it gets approved. We had 10 that got approved to go from FYI to mandatory this time around. And so as you can see, we have a couple device self-tests. We have a timestamp, persistent event log, and some identify. And as long as with a format and a flush test that got changed. So we also, with this release, added a bunch of new TPs and some ECNs. So for the NVM command set, we added almost actually between all of the TPs and ECNs, we added almost 100 tests. But for MVM, we added some that were basically went over the get log page with lower offset and upper offset differential. We went over some new telemetry log size changes. So we went over its log page data area 4 or ETDAS. We also added some changes for NVMe set endurance group management, which will cover basically areas where there's smart or health log pages, checking for non-zero entries, a couple new capacity management tests, and also deleting and creating NVM endurance groups and NVM sets. And lastly, we added some stuff to check data protection capabilities, making sure that things like DPC, STS, and MSET, which are like storage tag size and metadata size, are only applicable when they're supposed to be and are being ignored by the controller when they are not supposed to be used. We also had some changes that happened within the ZNS and TCP test suites. For ZNS, the large one was we had zone random right area test that got added. This includes a couple tests for implicit flushes or explicit flushes, and also making sure the right pointer is incremented when doing writing in a zone random right area. And we also added a couple tests for identify controller data structure with reported capabilities, which is pretty similar to some of the tests that we have in NVM. And we just want to make sure that they're staying up to date across this IO command set also. We did change a fair amount of tests to make sure that previously we had a couple tests that went over zone offline states and zone read-only states. And since we couldn't actually enter these, they weren't very useful, but we did change it so that we only test against drives that'll actually have a zone that's in that state. TCP, we added 2 new tests. These go over data digest for PDU header, and well, we do the PDU header and data digest and have them enabled and make sure that they're working properly. So in general, for test plan development, if we're just going to go over it, we have 2 major ones. And so this is like our second one of the year that happens. And basically, we try and do 2 a year so we can keep up to date with as many of the TPs and ECNs as we can. We write the test plans on behalf of the ICC and make sure that they get approved through the NVMe technical work group and the NVMe board. All these new tests come out and they're entered in as FYI. So you don't necessarily have to pass them, but we try and go through and make sure that both the devices out in market, because there's not a lot when we first do it, start passing the tests and that the tests are written correctly. So we just want to make sure that we can validate they're successful before making them mandatory. The next thing I'm going to go over is the IOL Interact test tool or test tools that we have. The first one that we have is our PC Edition package. You can obtain this from after you get a membership with NVMe, with actually the IOL NVMe group or our NVMe OF test group. There also is an NVMe Express, which you should join if you want to make it onto the integrators list. But once you get a membership with the IOL, basically we'll send you a license agreement you'll fill out. And after that, you can download the package from OneDrive. This is just kind of a nice reminder. We have swapped recently from Box to OneDrive. So if you're looking to download a new package like 17C or currently 18.0A, please go to OneDrive. And if you don't have a link, please send us an email and we'll make sure you get one. After you've downloaded and installed the package, which there's also an installation guide located on OneDrive, we will send you a license and you can start running after you put that license in your package. Some of the major things that have happened with 18.0A is we're now running on Ubuntu 20.04 versus we used to be running on 18.04. And we have also updated to kernel 5.10 from kernel 5.5.10. We're just trying to make sure we can keep this up to date and on long-term stable releases. Some future things that we're actually trying to do with this test tool. Currently, our implementation uses Java GUI, and we're hoping to go to a Python GUI fairly soon. This should be a little more stable because we have noticed some issues. And it'll be a lot easier for us to support in the future if we run into any issues. We're also working with this, merging our command line and GUI into one thing so that it's a lot easier for vendors to actually use our product. So you don't have a bunch of different areas that you use. It would just be one command that you could enter with a couple of different flags. Another thing to stay up to date, we are updating in the near future to NVMe CLI 2.1.2. The 18 and 17 package currently use 1.14. We will also be looking to add remote licensing, and we will be looking to add some new test suites for both key value, flexible data placement, and computational programming. And obviously, if there's anything that you're interested in us adding, please reach out to us and we'll do our best to see if we can add it. Here are some of the PCIe interop systems that we have for testing. They're all available on the website if you want to take a deeper look into this. We are looking to always looking to diversify our interoperability test bed. So if you have any suggestions, we're also open to hearing those. For the over Fabrics Plugfest, we are looking to do a ZNS over Fabrics proof of concept. So we recently rewrote our ZNS test to use the NVMe CLI, and we did this so that we could run it over Fiber Channel, RDMA, iWarp, TCP, because previously they were using SPDK and we had some issues over anything besides PCIe. So we will basically try and set up a fabric with both NVM and ZNS enabled targets and try and connect them and make sure that they can see each other and we can actually run these tests. We're going to try and test out a couple different kernels. Our PC edition, as I said earlier, currently runs on 5.10, but we have noticed some limitations that doesn't allow us to run ZNS over fabrics on that same kernel. We've noticed that 5.19 seems to be a little bit better, but we would like to test a wider range with multiple drives and multiple systems to see what works best, and then go from there off that implementation. So for the future, we are going to do some look into, so this is basically for the spring this coming year. We're looking to do TP15 or 2015. These are a bunch of different TPs that we're looking to and ECNs. There's a couple of big ones in here like dispersed namespace, fabrics, and PCIe host identifier settings. Basically, these are the ones that we will be going through for the next release. But if you're interested in other TPs and ECNs, we can try and figure that out for the next major release after that. But these normally are taken from the technical working group meetings, what we see is the most important brought up by the members. These also do tend to lag behind what's actually happening in the spec by about 6 months, just because we want to make sure everything is ratified. And then it will take a little bit of time for us to actually develop the test plan and the tests to get them out to you guys. All right. If you do notice any issues with our tool, our test plan, anything, please reach out to us. One of the ways you can do that is you can issue reports on my IOL. There's a link in the bottom right. It's just iol.unh.edu/my/login. Here, basically, you can fill out a ticket, which you'll see how to do this in the next slide. Once you fill out a ticket, someone will reach out to you, hopefully within 48 hours, business hours, and we'll basically report what we think the issue is, if we try and get you an estimated fix time, and if it's going to make the next release or not. We track these tickets internally and can also provide you with a number that we're using. And the nice thing is when we do releases, we have release notes that say all the tickets that we have addressed. And so you can check the release notes to see if a bug that you had reported has been fixed. And we do have the 2 major releases, like I said, but we do try to keep as many incremental releases in between for basically instead of new development, but making sure that any bugs that arise are getting addressed as soon as they can. So this is the IOL webpage that I was talking about. It says you can report your tickets here. Yep, and it's pretty easy. If you just fill it out, your product, how severe it is, basically what's happening. You can post your log in here if it's a script that's failing, and we will reach back out to you as soon as we can. So here, I'd like to thank the partners and supporters that we've had. So we have had Teledyne, Viavi, Serial Tech, Sandlays, and Quartz. They've supported us in previous Plugfests, and we'd just like to thank them. And I will pass it back off to Carter.
All right, thanks, James. So I'm just going to be going over shipping logistics of the coming Plugfest. So first of all, here is our registration links. These are also available on our website, of course. We will be closing registration on October 21st. So please, if you're planning on coming, get the registration filled out by then. So the limits are right now, 2 unique products per vendor based on availability basis. So if we find that we have more bandwidth based on who's registered and there's still another device that can be waitlisted, we will switch it into an active device and actually start testing or make it eligible for testing. So we will be developing the schedule once this registration is closed, and we'll have a better idea of who's coming and how many different vendors and different devices we'll be having. And this applies to both PCIe and the Fabrics Plugfest. So just for shipping and logistics, I don't know if you are planning on, if you're bringing a PCIe device, just bringing it with you in your travels. But if not, if you're planning on shipping it, just please make sure that we have the device here the Friday before the event starts. That way we'll just be ready to go on Monday morning. For the device itself, please have at least 2 samples. This is important for the interoperability testing, as well as just having redundancy in case anything goes wrong with any of the devices, gets put in a bad state or critical error, or who knows what can happen. So always good to have a couple backups. Also, in bringing any PCIe extender cards or adapters will be super helpful, as we found that there might be some interoperability problems between different vendor and different PCIe devices. Not always, but you never know. And whatever you're testing with at your own lab, it's probably the best way to test it here at our lab. And if you're shipping it, please remember to enter a return label, because that helps us out getting a quick turnaround so you can make sure you get the devices back as quick as possible. For over fabrics, it's a little bit more involved, since those devices tend to be bigger, especially if you're shipping a switch or a JBOF. So I mean, the same thing applies. Make sure we have the devices by the Friday before the over fabrics. Plugfest begins, and since there tends to be more devices and more cabling and everything involved in this, having a good itemized list so we make sure that everyone's devices and support technology gets returned to them and not to someone else will be really helpful, just so we know whose stuff is what. We'll also have plenty of conference rooms available for anyone who needs to, talk to their engineers back home. We'll be able to provide internet, remote internet to other parts of the world if that's necessary. So any firmware engineers can debug from anywhere in the world. Here is our shipping address. It has been the same for the past few years, thankfully. So it's just sending it to 21 Madbury Road, Suite 100 in Durham, New Hampshire. That's us. Just put attention NVMe Lab or NVMe Plugfest, just so we know what the device is and what it's here for. Like I said before, testing will not begin until Monday of the event, and we will make the schedule after the registration closes. And we have a hard deadline for getting out our reports by December 9th. That's a couple weeks after the Plugfest ends. So it gives us time to review all the logs and everything and make sure any discrepancies or issues are solved by then. It also gives us a little time for Thanksgiving. All right, this is a very important slide right here, to be prepared for the actual testing. So in order to make sure that everybody has a smooth testing experience, downloading the software at your own labs and running it and finding any potential issues your product has or our product has together will help make sure that when we actually do test it for real, it can just go through, and any potential failures will have either already been communicated and understood, or not happen at all by the time the Plugfest starts. So that's probably the most important thing. Coming in here blind might result in some unexpected problems. You'll need a licensing agreement if you've not already signed it, and the software that we have links for down here. But if you do not have a link to this, just please let us know and we'll get one to you as soon as possible. Right. So just wrapping up. So James mentioned the ICC. We go on calls every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific to talk about different testing things happening. We've talked about the Plugfest for the past few weeks, of course, and we'll continue to do so. We can talk about any potential compliance issues we might be having, or anything of those sorts of things that go with the testing. So this is really the NVMe testing group meeting. So if you have any questions about what we're doing or what might be coming down the line, please join them and we'll be there. We also are going to be having another webinar coming up at the end of October. The link is not live yet for registration, but we'll just be talking more about what James is mentioning with the future test items and future changes to our own test tool. And our goal for that is really just to hear what potential features you might want out of our software. We can ask some just yes or no questions just to get some straw polls down and see where the industry is at and what we can improve on and what we want to implement next. So that'll be at the end of this month. All right, just wrapping up again. So here are some of our contact information. If you need to talk to me or James, we'll be happy to talk through email or chats or calls or anything you need. So just let us know and we'll talk. So I think now we're going to be moving on to questions. Let's see. Seeing any of my question and answer. All right, James is going to answer the question.
All right, so we did have a question about OCP, which is independent from NVMe testing. But currently we are doing some beta testing in the lab. So if you'd like to reach out for that, we can possibly have you ship in some drives and we can do some testing here. But we are still trying to look into that more, and we'll come back with a further release on that in the near future. We also have another question about OS and kernel. And so basically for now, the kernel that we're running on is 5.10 and the OS is 20.04 for Ubuntu. And this is for 18.0A, and it'll be there for the foreseeable future until we find we need to upgrade again. If you notice, our 17 package is dual released, and it's just to make it a little bit easier for people to upgrade. But the idea is that everyone should be running on 20.04 with kernel 5.10.
All right, another question just about going for a reservation and not Plugfest. So a reservation can be made using the My IOL portal, the same thing that is used for reporting any issues. So if for whatever reason you still want to test 18.0 but can't make it to this Plugfest, once the Plugfest is over, you can register. We do have plenty of availability in December at this point, so feel free to register there and we'll test it the same. Another question about Red Hat and SUSE support for initiators. That's a good question. So we are actively trying to change our installation scripts right now and our Python scripts for compilation this week to see and do some experimental builds. Like we were saying before, we are only really running and building and supporting Ubuntu at this state, but we have done it in the past on CentOS. So I think that is currently what we're working towards, to see if we can get a CentOS 8 stream build working so we can support other different operating systems.
Yeah, we had previously gotten CentOS to work on 7.9, so we don't believe it'll be an issue to get it on running on 8 either. But yeah.
And that is for, right, like the question said, that's for the initiators. For the target, it's we'll be running our own initiators from our Ubuntu tool. And then one other question we have for everybody else is if there's any interest in flexible data placement or what other potential command sets people are going to be implementing. We want to make sure that we are ahead of the curve. So if there are, please definitely reach out and we will start developing them as soon as we can. We've got a raised hand. Barry. Let's let Barry talk. Where is his name? There we go. All right,
It was
should be
just
good to
a
talk,
question
Barry.
about flexible data placement and impact.
Sorry, hang on, my volume's down. Go ahead, sorry, say it again.
Flexible data placement, TP, as it might affect FC and NVMe. Have you done any work on the impact of that?
Not at this state. We're just getting kind of our feelers out and seeing who's doing what at this point.
Okay, because it does appear that the FC NVMe standard needs to make some changes for flexible data placement.
Okay, that'll be something to watch out for then. Yeah,
I just wanted to know if you had done any testing there. So,
no,
okay.
not yet. We're still looking for APIs and trying to see what tools we'll be using to implement them in Interact first before we get to that state.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. All right. I am not seeing any other questions at this date. So if that is that, feel free to email us. I should pull up my emails again. Oh no, wrong way. There we go. Feel free to email myself or James if you have any other questions that you don't feel like asking here or you think of something later. But otherwise, I want to thank you all for attending, and hopefully we'll see you in November. All right. Thank you.